this episode, I speak with Maria. This story highlights a beautiful journey of trust in oneself and of the intuitive guidance that Maria listened to when seeking birth support. Maria navigated 2 wild pregnancies and felt the call to invite a wise elder midwife who was on the cusp of her retirement when Maria was having her first child. For her second birth, Maria chose to have a group of women support her and hold her in reverence and love throughout the birth process of her daughter. Maria then speaks to the healing that she needed to go through from deep depletion in her postpartum times. She was a lifelong vegetarian who began eating a vegan diet in both of her pregnancy and postpartum experiences. Both of those times were very challenging and left her with a frayed and stressed nervous system. Because she didn't have the support of someone to say that her body was craving the regeneration of animal-based foods, she came into the realization on her own that it was in fact animal products that would be able to bring her body back into repair. This is a beautiful story of Maria finding her way, listening to what she needed by way of support, and bringing the necessary healing back into her body years after her children were born in order to come back into health and wholeness. Hello, Maria.
Hello, Karma.
How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Yes, I'm well, thank you. I'm very excited to hear your stories because we had a little bit of chat on the back end about your birth stories, and you weren't quite sure if it was something that would kind of fit and resonate with being on the Free Birth in Color podcast. And I think your story is a perfect example of why it will be here. So we will get into that, which I'm very excited to hear. But first question I want to ask you is, what is your lineage and ancestry that you're passing on to your children?
Absolutely. So my ancestry is mixed. And I've been sitting with actually recently this term that I remembered from my childhood that I'm sure maybe other people can relate to too. Growing up, the word that was used to describe my race was half. And that is how people referred to me, and my ethnicity was half. So I grew up in Nova Scotia with a white mother of European descent. Her family would have been from France and Ireland and Scotland. And my father's side of the family would be from African descent. And they grew up in a village in the Bedford Basin in Halifax, Nova Scotia called Africville. And it was this place that I remember from my childhood through the stories that I heard from my grandparents and from my father, who grew up there, was that it was a deep sense of community for them. And the history goes that in the 1800s, when slavery was being abolished in the States, a bunch of African Americans would have been fleeing slavery that came up from America and formed a little community in the Bedford Basin. And that community existed there since the 1800s and would be where all of my Black family would have come from.
Wow.
So it's quite a big part of Canadian history that I find often gets forgotten or misplaced. So I'm really proud to have those stories and those memories in my lineage, and to have my grandparents and my father that I could ask, their experiences and to hear what they felt growing up in Africville.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really amazing. I didn't even know that there was a place in Nova Scotia, named Africville.
Africville, yeah.
Africville, yeah, that many enslaved Africans were fleeing to find safety and refuge. So thank you for bringing that up. That's so amazing. And yeah, that's really wonderful. Like you said, you have your father and your grandparents that can really give you stories of what they went through and of that history and that part of your life.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
So then, with that being said, the next question that I want to ask you is, where does your mothering journey begin?
Yeah, this question, I could go many ways with it. And I think for me, the place where I feel the most energetic resonance is probably in my mid 20s. I had graduated from university, and I think, like many people who graduate from college, um, after I received my degree, I kind of went on this quest of wondering, who am I? And whoa, wait a minute, I've been thrown out of this educational system that I've been in for the past, 20 something years. And I kind of had felt like I was just dropped a little bit, and I wasn't really sure where to go next. And a lot of my classmates were applying to additional schools to get their PhDs, and some had returned to their hometowns to, get a job and do that kind of thing. And I really took a pause to try and figure out what I wanted to do next because I wasn't sure. Uh, I knew that I was interested in healing, and part of me felt like I wanted to pursue medicine. So I did write my MCAT and started to apply to medical schools.
Wow.
During my test itself, during the MCAT, I remember looking at the window and just feeling like it wasn't quite aligned, that there was something else that I needed to do first. So I left and went home and booked a one-way ticket to Europe and thought I would really just discover my true calling. So I started traveling alone, backpacking as a single woman, and went to many amazing countries and places. And I found that in my travels, I would always gravitate or find myself in these small villages where there was women doing what I would call like women's work, which was tending to the babies, keeping a home, cooking food, and chatting together and just forming community. So that really stuck out for me. And then as I kept moving along, I kept being curious about birth, because it felt like up until then, I hadn't really thought about it. I hadn't thought about my births. Or my birth as in me being born. I hadn't been introduced to birth by any of my family, giving birth around me. So it was really in this way of traveling and being around women that I started to just bring this curiosity of like, birth and motherhood. And do I want to be a mother? I'm not really sure. And then I found myself in Israel, which was a very interesting experience. And there was this beautiful full moon night where I was still sitting with this question of, what do I want to be? What do I want to do with my life? And I was staying with a family, and I had just recently met somebody who became my husband, who's now my ex-husband. So I was living with him and his family, and they had this drum on the wall. So I went and got the drum on this full moon night and went to this desert landscape and started to drum and called upon, all of the forces that I could think of to help guide me. And I had asked for a clue or something to just point me into the direction that I wanted, that I needed to go in next on my initiation. And my specific request was, okay, my great spirit, Mother Earth. I believe I even called in, like Mary Magdalene, these goddess entities that I wanted to connect with. And I asked, for something. I said, please take me on a journey. I want something to just grab me and pull me in and teach me and bring me to where I need to go next. And in my mind, I thought, okay, I'll go home and maybe I'll have an email from, someone about a course I need to do. And a couple of weeks later, I was pregnant.
Wow.
So kind of like this calling in of something that I wasn't consciously aware of, but somewhere, some force knew that this is what I needed. So I met motherhood with a lot of, I would say, trepidation. When I received the news that I was pregnant, it was terrifying because it wasn't really what I was expecting. And I think in my storyline, up until then, I had been so living life in my masculine body, kind of caught up in what should I be doing and should I do this and how can I succeed and what can I achieve? And I think, me calling in this initiation and honoring this passage forward into this woman that I wanted to be. It really anchored me in my feminine. And I think that motherhood is, you know, what brought me to really embodying the deep feminine that was, I think, stagnant for a long time.
Wow.
So that's, I feel like, when it began, that calling in of an initiation and a place where I really needed to, yeah, embody something bigger for my life.
Wow. That's so powerful. Wow. That's such a beautiful story.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so then let's see. I got pregnant and me and my ex-partner were traveling at that time. We had figured that we wanted to leave Israel. It wasn't the greatest place to start a family. So we packed up our backpacks and started to travel. And all we knew was that we wanted to find community and that we wanted to find a safe place to birth. So we let those intentions kind of guide us. And we ended up in India searching for birthing centers there. We ended up in South Africa where we were just, yeah, guided to all these incredible traditional midwives who instilled in us this sense of birth as a safe place, a place where women belong, a place where women, you know, can find their true power, and a place where birth can be beautiful and sacred and honored as the natural rhythm of life that flows through our bodies as birthing women. So through those travels, we really got acquainted with this idea that birth is safe and birth is natural and that we could do it ourselves. So we started to talk to many families in South Africa that had birthed outside of the system in their homes with just, you know, themselves and their partners or their immediate families. And it really gave us the courage to want to do something similar. So we continued to explore those threads. And in searching for the right place to be, we ended up landing on Salt Spring Island on the west coast of Canada and got here. I think I was 8 months pregnant, still waddling around with my backpack and landed on a small farming community and began to set up our birthing cave. And it was then where I remember wondering, are we going to do this? Are we going to do a birth outside of the system, just me and my partner on this foreign island that we just arrived in a couple of weeks ago? We didn't know anybody, so it kind of seemed like the most natural choice to birth just the two of us. And so we started to set up for that and to get acquainted with that idea and to form community around, you know, just in case we needed anything. And then one of my beautiful midwife friends and teachers, her name is Robin Sheldon. She taught me a lot about birth in South Africa. She asked if she could come. So she flew all the way from South Africa to our little cabin on Salt Spring Island.
Wow, what a journey.
Yeah, which was wonderful because it felt like we had this deep grandmother energy to support us, which was really, really, really incredible. And a couple days before the birth, we were really sitting with, okay, are we doing this? Is it going to be the three of us now giving birth? And we decided to pull some tarot cards, and we pulled from many questions. One question, you know, should we birth just the three of us? Should we birth with the midwives? Or should we birth with, you know, maybe a doula or someone else who could hold that space for us? And the cards were interesting, but I think the one that I wanted to speak of was that giving birth, just the three of us, holding that space together. We pulled the death card, which was really interesting because in the tarot, death can sometimes mean death, but it also can mean transformation and breakthrough and, you know, this ecstatic embrace of the wildness of life itself. So when we pulled that, we were all kind of sitting with chills of, okay, how are we going to hold this? Are we going to hold this birth with the energy of, you know, I don't even know what to call it, I guess just the polarity of life and death itself. Are we okay with going into this experience knowing that this could be totally ecstatic, or that it could bring death?
Mm-hmm.
So we sat with that for a long time, and in the end, it felt like, why didn't I just go and have a conversation with the midwife and see what she says? So I did, and I met with the local midwife on Salt Spring, who had been the midwife for a very long time. I want to say 20 years plus. And she was just coming up to her retirement. And when I met her, it felt like she had this wise grandmother energy that I just felt like I wanted to curl up and just be around. And when we spoke of all my fears of, these are the reasons why I don't want a medical midwife. These are the reasons why I'm not interested in having midwifery care. She really held it. And I think there was this natural resonance because of where she was on her career. I mean, she was retiring in just a few weeks. We ended up actually having our baby on the last day before she was due to retire.
Wow.
I think I got a call on Tuesday night that was like, okay, Maria, I know you're not sure if you want to have me on your birth, but I'm retiring on Thursday.
Wow.
So I went into labor that night, and my son was born the next day.
Wow. So can I just quickly rewind you for a moment?
Yeah.
While you and your partner were traveling and you were pregnant and you were kind of meeting traditional midwives, what kind of prenatal care, if any, were you doing during that?
None.
Okay.
Yeah. It felt like I wanted to preserve just the sacredness that I felt was dwelling in my body. And it felt like any tests or any screening or any ultrasounds would disrupt this natural flow that I felt so connected with. So even when we were meeting these traditional midwives, it was really neat because they supported that too. It wasn't like it didn't feel like we were this force that was against the system around us. When we were living in South Africa during the majority of my pregnancy, the energy that we received, or the information that we received from the traditional midwives there, was like, you're doing the right thing. Because they felt the sacred, that's how they practiced there. And sometimes out of curiosity, or maybe just, their curious hands, they would kind of reach over if I was in a room with them and touch my belly just to gauge where the baby was, or to feel the size. So I had a few things like that, just some like loving hands reaching over to be like, oh, there you are. And oh, I think the baby's in that position, and things like that, which felt really great because it felt like it really afforded us this great container of care and safety and trust. Because the vibes down there in the midwifery sphere are like very trusting and very welcoming and very beautiful. So we felt really comfortable just with honoring the safety that I felt in my body and my intuition that told me that that was what we needed to do.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. And my teacher, Robin Sheldon, who taught me how to be a doula in a doula training in Turkey, and the same midwife who came for our birth on Salt Spring, one of the things that she holds in her practice of midwifery care is something called soul integration. So she works with couples in their pregnancy to connect them to the soul of their incoming child, to receive messages from the baby that may help the birthing process or may help their journey into parenthood in general. So when we were in South Africa, we were living with her, and we would do often check-ins of my higher self meeting my baby and my baby meeting me, just to inform our decision-making process around which type of care we wanted to receive and not. And every time we tuned into my baby, he would tell us, I'm well, I'm happy, and I'm safe. So we had that, which really, really, really helped guide us to know that we were doing the right thing for us as a family.
That's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. That's so beautiful. Wow.
So we felt totally supported. And then when we got to Salt Spring as well, we checked in with that decision of, okay, are we going to do this by ourselves, or are we going to call the midwife? And when we tuned into our baby, they said, either is fine, just trust yourself. So in the end, when we called the local midwife, she became this figure of trust for us. And mostly she sat in the corner knitting. And I called her over if I had a question, but she stayed completely out of the way and just guided us with her deep love. And I think that grandmother archetypal energy of like, it almost feels like I want to describe her in a sound. Like she felt like humph, like this
Mm-hmm.
heavy, weighty energy of trust that was just in the corner somewhere. So it was wonderful. It was a wonderful thing.
That sounds, yeah, that just sounds so amazing. What a beautiful space to bring your child into.
Uh,
Such good energy.
yeah. And we carried it forward too to the birth of my second child. I also have a daughter. So my first child, he is 6 now, and I have a daughter who's 4. Um, and when we were getting ready for her birth too, we had the same questions. Are we gonna birth outside of the system again? Are we gonna call our midwives from South Africa to come again? Are we gonna use the medical midwives? And the same kind of threads continued into my second pregnancy too. I didn't use any prenatal care because I wasn't interested. Uh, and I think that came from this knowing that I felt also from attending births myself. So after my first child was born, I started to work on Salt Spring as a doula and started to experience firsthand just what prenatal care is in BC. And there were many things that I was quite upset with. It felt like the care that I noticed was very protocol driven. We do these things because we do them for everybody. So here they are to do them too.
Yeah.
And that didn't really sit well with me. So when I became pregnant again, I knew that I wasn't going to be using that care because I wanted to safeguard my energy system and form, yeah, I guess a buffer of wellness for my baby to be in during those months of gestation. And for the birth itself, we ended up choosing to have 4 women that were instructed that they chose to be our sacred birth keepers for that journey. So I had 4 women who were my doulas, I guess you could call them. I don't think any of them had ever given birth before, but they somehow felt like they were each holding something special for us. And our neighbor at the time was also, I guess you would call her the nurse assistant for the midwife. She's the midwife or the nurse that always attends home births with the midwife. She was our neighbor. So it felt right to have her there because she walked through the woods in the middle of the night when I went into labor to meet us there. It was really magical. And in the end, I instructed her, you can be the gatekeeper of whether or not you feel like advice or support from the midwife would be helpful. I'm going to leave that to you. And I trusted her because we also, belong in a couple other spheres in our community where I could really feel her trust in birth too. And in the end, we did call the midwife because my labor stalled. And after a couple of hours, I was really losing my energy. And the 4 doulas that I'd chosen were not doulas, they were just supports, and they weren't sure what to do. And me and my tiredness, I wasn't sure what to do next either. So we called the midwife, and she was amazing. She got me doing lunges up the stairs to get the baby to turn, which was advice, that I wouldn't have thought of, or the women around me wouldn't have thought of either. But in those lunges, my baby turned and was delivered, within an hour after the midwife got there. So it felt like another piece that we needed. Um, So I think the thread in both of my stories is just like surrendering in all directions, surrendering to my ideas, surrendering to my expectations, and just allowing there to be an ease and a flow in what I want versus what needs to happen.
Right.
I was really, really conscious about not being too rigid, I guess, and just trusting in the natural progression of both of my pregnancies and labors and delivery, because I felt like the more I could surrender to whatever, the easier and the best outcomes would arrive.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you actually want to go a little deeper and actually speak of the whole experience that you felt with your son, birthing him for the first time, what it was like, being on the island, in this new space you've never been to, having your supports there with you? Like, what did you feel in your body? What was it like? How far did you go in your gestation? Like, kind of those things. I would love to hear a more
Yeah,
about that birth story.
totally. I'd love to share. Yeah, my first birth was, yeah, it felt like a deep initiation. Like I said before, I think most of my life up until pregnancy and up until birth, I had been living in my masculine body, like I mentioned before. And it took a lot. I think the labor itself really undid that. It undid a lot of those old ways of conditioning that I was programmed to be in,
Mm.
and allowed this deep softening into my more receptive, soft, feminine nature. So in that labor, or even in the pregnancy leading up, I still had, a few ideas of, how the birth was going to be. I was like, oh well, you know, it would be nice to have an orgasmic birth. It would be nice to feel no pain. It
Mhm.
would be nice to just allow the baby to just, slide right out. Um, and in the labor, I had to confront all of that because it was painful and because it was not orgasmic and because I too began to express myself in ways that I didn't think were me, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, so that labor was, I believe, 12 hours. And it was on this farm that we were living in the summertime. There was this beautiful sunlight coming in through most of the day. I could hear the farm workers, whippersnipping the driveway and the tractors going by. And we had my midwife from South Africa there who was wonderful because we had done so much of this soul integration work beforehand of connecting to my higher self and to the higher self of my baby to receive, yeah, guidance for the birth itself. And there was one image that I always returned to in that labor, which was this image of there being this clear pool or pond of water, and my baby's head was kind of just crowning this pool of water. And there was this butterfly that wanted to like pull my baby's head out of the water, and which was a beautiful image. And at the same time, there were times where the butterfly would really flap their wings and want to just pull that baby out of there as quickly as possible. Like, come on, just get out already. And
Mhm.
then the scene would kind of quiet and I would feel my body relax and the butterfly's wings would kind of slow down a lot more. And each time the butterfly's wings would slow down, the baby would come out just a little bit more. So we had found that image in one of my guided meditations that I did with Robin in my pregnancy. And it was something that I could return back to in the delivery itself, because there was a big part of me that wanted to escape it because it was too much, because I wanted it to be over, because I wanted to meet my baby, and because it was painful. Um, so I think with that labor, there was a lot of surrender and a lot of returning back to that soft place that I was meeting for the first time in myself of like, relax, soften, and trust that
Mhm.
really came through. Um, yeah, so it was a beautiful thing to have that embedded practice. to come back to you through the whole labor.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And where was your son born? Was it in water or on
No,
land?
yeah, he was born on a birthing stool in our bedroom in the corner. And then the end, I guess the interesting thing was that um, we had done all this work to get ready for this birth that might have been unassisted and might have been just my partner. And in the end, I wanted the wise eyes of that grandmother presence to be the one I was looking at. So we had our midwife who came from South Africa. We had my partner's parents were there.
Oh, wow.
I had a doula, and there was a local guy in the community who was there to film the birth because he was involved in a birthing movie.
Okay.
So in our small cabin in the woods, we had all these people that I was open to being present for. And in the end, when just in the last hour or two of my labor, when our child was born, all I wanted was to be in the corner looking into the eyes of the midwife, because she felt to me like trust, and she felt to me like a presence I could really ground down and understand and to guide me. So yeah, our son's name was Luke. Our son's name is Luca, and he was born in our bedroom with the door shut, with everyone else behind the door. My partner was behind me, and I was staring at the midwife's eyes and squatting on a birthing stool.
Wow.
Which was really great, and beautiful too, because yeah, I felt a deep resonance with this woman, and now I see her still on the island around town. It's
Wow.
wonderful. Well,
Oh, that's so special.
mm,
It really is. And your placenta, how did that come? Was that easy? Did it take some time? What did you do with it?
yeah, we did. For our first birth, it took some time. So I think with both of my births, the people who were in the room were instructed of our wishes, which was we want to do this as undisturbed as possible. Um, so the midwife in both of our births knew that and allowed us to have this deep, extended kind of rest period after the baby was born. And they knew that I didn't want to rush the birth of the placenta. I wasn't interested in that. So both my placentas, I don't think, came out until maybe over an hour after delivery because I wanted that time to just meet my baby and not stress. Um, so both midwives gave us that time, and it was beautiful to just really meet our child, both children, for the first time without the stress of, okay, on to the next thing. And with our first placenta, with the birth of Luca, we actually buried it at a special place on Salt Spring Island near the ocean. Because often when we would connect with the soul of Luca, he always appeared in the water. I think I mentioned that image of him being in the pond with the butterfly, which was a frequent way that he would visit us. And in the dream time too, if I met him, it was always in the ocean or the lake or near a body of water. So I think in the first early days after he was born, his father and his grandfather, who was still around at the time, went to, yeah, a spot on the island near the ocean and buried it.
Wow.
Which was really sweet because I remember the day that they went. I was, still freshly postpartum in the first few days. And I remember being half asleep and half awake and having that image in my mind of two men going down to the shore with a shovel and a placenta in a pot. And they just walked down to the ocean and dug a hole and put it in whatever way that they felt was right. And I trusted it, and it felt really good to me too. And in our second birth, I had a dear friend who volunteered to come over just after the birth to hydrate it and encapsulate it for me. So we did that for our second child, which felt really good because I was really wanting some deep sustenance for the postpartum period that I knew could be quite challenging. And I still have it. some of those pills, and I also made a tincture of
Oh.
the powder to keep for menopause in my later years.
Mhm. Oh,
Mm.
that's amazing. Okay. And what about your daughter's birth? How did that all unfold?
Yeah, that was a really interesting experience for me. And that pregnancy too um, was, yeah, quite an experience. So after the birth of our first child, um, I was still getting used to this new relationship that I had formed with my partner that was quite new. And I think about around the time our son was 1.5, I was starting to wonder if this relationship was right for me for the long run. And I wasn't sure. Um, but I was willing to keep trying because it felt important to keep trying to foster a relationship with the father of my kids. So shortly after we kind of entered into this period of wondering how we were going to make this work, I got pregnant. And I knew from the very beginning that it was a daughter. It
Mm.
just felt so different than my son. And I immediately contacted my friend, my midwife friend from South Africa, Robin, to do a couple more soul integration sessions of meeting my new baby while she was in my womb. And she always came through with flowers around her, and in particular, purple flowers. And I would always see this image of purple flowers being connected to her belly button to mine. And that was always how she showed herself, which is interesting because now she's 4 and purple flowers are her favorite things. And the color purple is her favorite color. She's
Wow.
like, okay, there's something actually meaningful going on here. Um, because yeah, it's quite significant. But yes, throughout the rest of that pregnancy, I was sitting with this inquiry of, is this relationship going to work? And is it right for all of us? Um, so when I went into that labor too, I still had that in my mind of, okay, I'm birthing this baby with a partner that I'm not sure if I'm going to stay with or not. And here we are. And again, it was just, surrendering to that. And I think that informed the way that I um, formed my circle of support around me. I wanted women to support me because I felt like that was something I could trust. And at that moment, I wasn't sure if I could trust my partner because there was so much instability in our relationship.
Mhm.
So for that birth, it was it was really beautiful because I had these 4 women who had never been at a birth before. None of them were mothers. And somehow the field that they created was so beautiful. And it's hard to kind of describe that. And I think a way that would make sense to someone just listening. Um, but they were burning, incense, they were chanting, they were singing, they were drumming, they were rubbing me in oil from head to toes. When I had to do the lunges up the stairs for an hour to get my baby to turn, they would take turns holding my side, like holding my shoulders or holding my back. And the whole time they were singing or chanting or massaging me. And it felt timeless. It felt like we entered into this sphere of, I don't know, I want to call it like, it just felt like safety, and it
Mm.
felt best. It felt familiar. It felt primal. It felt embodied. And often I would come out of labor and just open my eyes and see these beautiful womanly faces smiling at me, and it was so deep and so beautiful and interesting too that I found that when I was birthing my daughter, because I think part of me felt like in some ways she could feel that initiation too.
Right.
Um, so it was really beautiful. And yeah, she was born on a winter morning in January as the soft snow was falling. And
Oh.
it was quiet and peaceful and deeply, deeply empowering.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so beautiful.
Wow, that's so lovely. And your postpartum experiences with these two babes, how were they similar? Were they different? Did you prepare for them?
Yeah, they're both very different and both very challenging. Um, So for me, one thing that I've been healing from since both of these experiences is just deep depletion.
Mm.
I had been vegetarian my whole life and had been vegan since my late teens, I want to say around 19. And I was vegan through my first pregnancy, was vegan through my first postpartum, was
Mm.
vegan through my second pregnancy, and was vegan through my second postpartum.
Okay.
And one thing that I've been learning is that the physiological needs of a woman in general, but especially a birthing woman, especially a postpartum woman, is that she needs animal products to function, to
Mm.
be well. And I say that now with this grounded knowing that that is completely true. It's not really my opinion. It's not my, I don't know, something that I'm just speaking out of my mouth to say it. It comes from this deep knowing now of like, it's it's necessary.
Yeah.
So I had a really challenging time, both postpartums, because I wasn't getting what I needed. And I remember saying to the people around who were supporting me, I would always say, it feels like my brain needs like lubricant. Like my brain felt dry, is what
Right.
I kept telling people, which didn't make, rationally, I don't think people knew how to handle that information, but I kept saying like my nervous system feels frayed and my brain feels dry.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was all I knew how to say. But I knew I didn't feel well. Um, so it was a big challenge because I really could feel the stress of it in my nervous system. But at that time, I didn't have anybody to tell me what I needed. Because I think now we live in a society where it's kind of edgy to tell someone to do something that's against their beliefs. And I was a hardcore vegan at times, a hardcore raw vegan.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
my community would just bring me, a mushroom elixir or some spirulina. Like they would go with me there. And I
Yeah.
didn't have the same, grandmother, old time wise woman to bring me a chicken soup or something, which is probably what I deeply needed.
Yeah.
Um,
Some bone
so I
broth.
really bone raw, animal fat.
Yeah.
So they're both really, really challenging
Mm.
because, yeah, I really felt the effects of my nervous system, just feeling that sense of frayedness.
Mhm.
That was pretty hard. So now my child is 4 and I just started eating animal products a year ago
Okay.
and doing so consciously uh, to repair
Mm-hmm.
how much I depleted myself in my postpartum times.
Right.
Um, so it's become, yeah, this past year specifically has been a deep surrender and again, a deep slowing down and almost like rebuilding the postpartum period time
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't offer to myself. So now consciously, my days are really slow, really meaningful, and mostly focused on what foods I need to repair.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So it's been and one thing that has really made me passionate about supporting women in postpartum now, because I have that confidence just to be like, actually, there's foods that you need, and these are them, and I want to offer them to you.
Yeah, I have kind of a similar journey to you. I don't have kids, but with the vegan depletion and now like coming into um, eating animal products and nourishing my body and, making sure that I prioritize eating and eating well and consciously is something that's been in the forefront for me for the last two years, coming up to 2 years now.
Um,
And same for, working with women. I say like, look, you're going through a really big change in your life and you need these, animal products, bone broths, butters, good fats, these things to sustain you as you are building life in your body and then as you repair from that. So
so,
I totally resonate with what you're saying, coming out of depletion and trying to, yeah, rebuild that back in yourself because I'm in the same journey right
mhm.
now, but doing this before I get pregnant and before.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, so it's been, a journey that I've, like I said, been on for 2 years. But yeah, I've got really big resonance with you and with that. And
Totally. One
Mhm.
of my friends shared with me kind of like this one liner that I often share is eating animals is kind of like letting the animal mother you.
Mhm.
Especially in a culture where, mothering is not so supported by, the general public. One way that we can ensure that we're being mothered is by letting another being mother us. And for me, that kind of comes through in the animals of like, okay, I can take this in because it's another life that is mothering me, giving my body what it needs.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I
Mhm.
never thought of it that way. That's really, really amazing.
Yeah. And it helps too for many people who, might be on a similar journey of not wanting to, to consume animals. That's one thing that helped me even have the courage to start was, can I embrace support from another being that was alive once? How can I take that in with integrity? And for me, it was okay, I'm embracing this animal's vital nutrients supporting me in a
Wow,
really way.
that's beautiful. That's really, really lovely.
Mhm.
Wow. Well, is there anything else that you want to speak to in your pregnancy, birth, postpartum journeys, that you feel is should be mentioned as we're here?
Well, I could speak to a little bit about the work that I guess I do now, which is I do birth work. I'm a doula and I do postpartum care. And yeah, for me, one of the things that um, I don't know sustains me in this work is just that idea that birth in and of itself is this initiation into your feminine nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the feminine nature is wise and the feminine nature is soft and the feminine nature knows truth for them and for their bodies. They can really feel it. Um, so one of the ways I support women is through that knowledge of that, their body knows how to do this. And I want to be there as sacred witness to allow their body to do what they what it knows to do. Um, so yeah, I do support I guess undisturbed births in my community.
Yeah.
Um, and I do support postpartum care by nurturing it with what it needs. So I wanted to share that too, just in case there's someone out there who might feel a resonance. I'm here and happy to support.
Absolutely. So share, how can people get a hold of you, like contact
Mhm.
information, your website if you have one, so that if there is a woman seeking your services or to speak with you, they can do that.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to connect with anyone who feels a resonance here. My website and I guess the name of my business is Ima's Alchemy. So Ima means mother in Hebrew, and that's what my kids call me. And I chose it for the name of my business because, yeah, like I shared at the beginning of our chat, was it feels like my motherhood journey began in the desert in Israel when I was calling in those um, energies to guide me to where I needed to go in my life. And birth work and motherhood feel like they're such a big part of who I am.
Mhm.
So yeah, my business name is Ima's Alchemy, which means mother's alchemy. And that's the name of my website. So it's www.imasalchemy.com. Ima is spelled INA. And then there's an S. So imasalchemy.com. And you can find me on Instagram. I believe it's my name, Maria Robbins. And I also support people with herbs. I'm a herbalist. And I do pelvic floor body work, so inner and outer vaginal works to support mothers um, postpartum or anywhere through
Amazing.
their childbearing years or
Mhm.
wherever they're in their sexual health journey. It's a big part of what I do too.
That's such important work. I think every woman should have sessions of working with their pelvic muscles, even if
Yes.
they don't want to have children, before children, after children, just as a way of keeping our feminine bodies healthy, whole, and well, that type of work is so essential. So I'm so grateful you mentioned that you're doing that, because
Mhm.
it's needed. More women need to be flocking towards this and getting
Exactly.
connected to their bodies in that way.
Yeah, and I love the way all of three of those interests of mine combine, because
Mm.
it feels like part of who I am is embodying, um, I guess, the skills of a traditional midwife. You know, someone who you can call to for herbs, someone that you can call to for physical touch in your, sacred areas, and someone you call to for birth and for healing afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm grateful to be here and grateful to be sharing my knowledge, and yeah, really grateful to be connecting with you, Karma,
Mm.
and be involved in this beautiful offering that you're curating for so many.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much, Maria. Your story is beautiful. And yeah, what you're offering in the world, you are stepping into that wise, you are in that wise woman role, and you're walking that beautiful path. So
Thank you.
yeah, it's so nice to know that you're out here doing this needed soul work. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, sisters, so much for listening to this episode of the Free Birthing Color podcast. If you'd like to work with me one-on-one in a primal activation session, donate to the podcast, or to have your story featured here or in the blog, go to primalwomanportal.com for all the information to do so. Did you want to connect with our guest speaker? You can find all her information linked within the show notes. And if you have time, please subscribe, write a review, and tell a friend to have a listen, so that this podcast and these stories of women birthing in their total power can be shared far and wide. Don't forget to check out the show notes for information on the Earth Daughters Women's Festival, the Breach Without Borders workshop, and much more. New episodes drop every Thursday morning, so stay tuned for the next amazing story to be shared on any platform that you prefer to listen to your podcasts on, or watch these episodes on the Free Birthing in Color YouTube page. And remember, your voice and your story matters. So if you're a woman of color or an Indigenous woman who's had a wild pregnancy and or birth outside of the medical system, submit your story, because it's so important that your voice is heard and celebrated in your radical journey of pregnancy, birth, and motherhood.